I was about 7 or 8 years old when my family took me to this man-made lake in South Georgia. It wasn't a real lake, not naturally formed. It was more like a huge dugout pond that someone had turned into a family park. The owner had brought in truckloads of beach sand, planted palm trees around the edges, and charged people admission to come swim, grill, and park their cars for the day. To a kid, it felt like a beach in the middle of nowhere. There was even a big water slide set up on one side of the lake. Looking back now, it was obviously unsafe. Kids were always getting scraped up or knocked into the water awkwardly, but at the time, it was just part of the fun. Parents would set up lawn chairs and grills along the shore, music would be playing, and the whole place smelled like sunscreen and charcoal. Where my family usually parked was across from this small island in the lake. It wasn't really an island, just a clump of sand sitting maybe 30 yards out from the shoreline. From where we set up, you could see it clearly, and kids would swim or bounce their way out to it all day long. I wasn't a very strong swimmer. I could swim, but not well. The water in that area was just a little deeper than my height, so I had learned to move by bouncing along the bottom. I'd push off with my feet, pop up for air, then sink back down and push again. It was slow, but it worked. That little island became my goal. I liked making it out there and sitting on the sand for a few minutes before heading back. One afternoon, I was doing exactly that. I was bouncing along the lake floor toward the island, moving carefully like I always did. The water was cloudy from people swimming, and I couldn't see much below the surface. I just kept my eyes forward and focused on the island. Then my foot came down on something that didn't feel like sand. It felt like a face. I remember it very clearly. My toes pressed into something soft, and I felt what seemed like a nose under my foot. The part that stayed with me the most was the hair. Fine hair drifting and waving between my toes in the water. For a second, I didn't understand what I had touched. I only knew it wasn't the bottom of the lake. My body reacted before my brain did. I jerked my foot up and scrambled backward, splashing and panicking until I reached shallower water. I got out and sat on the shore, breathing hard. I didn't tell anyone what I had felt. I was just a little kid, and my mind didn't know how to make sense of it. I sat there for a long time, staring out at the water near that island, trying to calm down. The day kept going. People were still swimming. Kids were still playing. Music was still playing from someone's radio. Then, I started hearing shouting. At first, it was just one voice, then more. Adults were walking up and down the shoreline calling out a name. Over and over again, they kept yelling for a little boy, asking if anyone had seen him, asking if anyone knew where he was. The mood of the whole place changed. People started standing up from their chairs. Parents pulled their kids closer. Some of the adults went into the water, searching around near the island. I watched from the shore, not really understanding what was happening, but feeling sick in my stomach. Then, they found him. They pulled his body up from the water right in front of that small sand island, the same island I had been bouncing toward, the same spot where my foot had come down on something that didn't feel like sand. I remember the parents screaming. I remember adults telling kids to look away. I remember the water around them going still as people backed away from the area. Even at that age, I knew what it meant. I had stepped on him. I'm 47 years old now, and there are a lot of things from my childhood that I don't remember clearly anymore, but that day never faded. I still remember the feeling, the shape under my foot. the soft resistance, the hair drifting between my toes in the water. Out of everything that happened that day, that is the part that never left me. I didn't realize how empty the Lake Street parking garage was until I couldn't stand up. The pain in my ankle hit all at once, sharp, nauseating, enough to make my vision pulse, and my phone battery was already down to 6%. This happened in Madison, Wisconsin, late last October. I had twisted my ankle badly in the stairwell after a late shift. The elevators were out, marked only by crooked handwritten signs taped to the wall. I sat on the concrete landing for a while, telling myself I could wait it out, but the garage cleared out faster than I expected. The lights hummed, my ankle swelled. I started to feel stupid and small and very alone. That's when the security officer showed up. He came up the ramp in a slow, deliberate walk, boots echoing, flashlight angled down so it didn't blind me. Dark blue uniform, reflective striping, calm voice. He introduced himself as Officer Hale with campus security and asked if I was injured. He didn't rush me. He told me to stay seated and not put weight on the ankle yet. Everything about him matched the tone I needed, measured, procedural, reassuring. He said the garage cameras had flagged a stationary subject and that he was dispatched to check. That sounded right. He asked for my ID, glanced at it, handed it back. He said medical could be called, but it would take time and it would be easier to escort me to the security office where they had ice and a chair. He suggested I conserve my phone battery in case I needed it later. I agreed. It all made sense. As we started toward the office, he took a route I wouldn't have chosen, down a service corridor instead of the main ramp. When I asked, he said the public areas were closing for overnight cleaning. He kept his flashlight trained just ahead of us, never quite letting it catch the security cameras mounted at the corners. I noticed that without really knowing why it bothered me. He talked in odd phrases, not wrong exactly, just off. He called the security office the station and referred to dispatch as the room. When his radio crackled, he pressed the button but didn't speak into it, then said, "We'll circle back," to no one in particular. His badge had a name and a number, but the seal was unfamiliar, too plain, like something printed after the fact. At one point, my phone buzzed in my pocket, a low battery alert, and he immediately said, "Let's not complicate things. Signals can interfere down here." He smiled when he said it, like he was sharing a tip. The corridor narrowed and the lights thinned. I remember thinking we were walking too long for a garage office. Then we passed a door marked with a faded facilities sticker, and taped beneath it, crooked like the elevator sign, was a notice that read, "Cameras out of service." No logo, no date. That was the moment. Not fear exactly, but a cold alignment of details. The wrong words, the routes, the way his flashlight avoided lenses, the handmade signs. I realized I hadn't seen another person since I fell. I realized he'd never once used my name, even though he'd looked at my ID. I don't remember deciding to run. My ankle screamed and I went anyway, shoving past him as the light swung wildly. I fell, scraped my palms, got up again. Somewhere a door alarm went off, sharp and unexpected, and footsteps answered from the other end of the hall. Real ones, multiple, shouting. The officer didn't chase me. He stepped back, calm as ever, and I lost sight of him in the glare. Everything after that was noise and motion. A maintenance worker helped me into a chair. An actual campus police officer took my statement while EMTs wrapped my ankle. They asked me to describe the security officer. I gave them the name. I gave them the badge number. 2 days later, I followed up. I filed a formal report. I sent emails. I went in person once my ankle could handle it. They informed me that there were no cameras in that corridor. According to their records, there had never been an Officer Hale in campus security, past or present. No one had been dispatched to the Lake Street garage at that time, and no alarms had been triggered on that level. The response was polite, professional, certain. Sometimes I think about the way he walked, unhurried, like time belonged to him, and I wonder how many signs I would have ignored if that alarm hadn't gone off by accident. My name is Laura Bennett, and this happened in Denver, Colorado during an otherwise forgettable week in March. I was killing time between appointments downtown, walking to avoid another coffee, when I ducked into what I thought was a public building off 17th Street, a narrow concrete structure with smoked glass and a small metal plaque that read Municipal Services. No seal, no hours listed. I assumed it was an auxiliary office, the kind you never notice until you need a restroom. Inside, the air was cool and dry. The lobby was clean but oddly de-decorated, like someone had removed everything with personality and forgotten to put it back. Beige tile, fluorescent lights, a directory board mounted on the wall with interchangeable black letters. It listed floors, records, planning, storage, but no numbers, just dots where the numbers should have been. I remember thinking it must be mid-update. There was an elevator at the back. The call button lit up immediately, no delay, no sound. When the doors opened, the interior was spotless and empty. No security camera, no inspection certificate. I stepped in without thinking. The doors closed softly. There were no floor buttons, just an up arrow and a down arrow. I pressed up. The ride was short. When the doors opened, I stepped into a hallway that felt unfinished in a way I couldn't articulate. The walls were painted, but the color was slightly off, like a test coat. The carpet was new but unpatterned, a flat gray that absorbed sound. Doors lined the hall, each with a frosted window and a label slot beneath it. Empty. No sounds, no hum of computers, no voices. I walked a little way down, my footsteps dull and swallowed. At the end of the corridor was a window looking out over the city. The view was wrong by inches, the angle slightly skewed, the spacing between buildings not quite right, as if the skyline had been redrawn from memory. I didn't feel afraid, just misplaced, like I'd taken a wrong turn inside something unfinished. A phone vibrated somewhere. My phone, I realized, buzzing in my bag. The signal dropped to 0 bars as I checked it. When I looked up again, the hallway lights flickered, not ominously, just the quick stutter of old wiring. That was enough. I went back to the elevator. When I reached the street, the afternoon felt louder than before. I stood across from the building to get my bearings and couldn't find it. The address number on the neighboring storefront jumped from 214 to 222. There was no narrow municipal building, just a bike shop with a mural on its side. Fresh paint. That night, I searched city records. Nothing matched. No municipal annex, no services building at that block. I assumed I'd misremembered the street and tried again the next day, walking the same route at the same time. I even checked my step history. It showed a pause where the building should have been, but the map pin drifted slightly, as if unsure. I asked a clerk at the bike shop if there'd ever been another building there. She said the shop had been there 8 years. I emailed the city's facilities department. They replied politely that no such property existed and never had. When I went back to look up the email later, the thread was gone. Not deleted, just absent. I stopped bringing it up. I stopped looking it up. But sometimes, when I'm downtown and not paying attention, I find myself slowing near that block, catching the faint reflection of a building in glass where none should be, and I keep walking, knowing that if I look directly at it, the doors might open again.